I'll come back to this because understanding the role of Foucault is so important. Here's another expression. This is a flower of life. It's the idea of 7 wheels within wheels within wheels. This represents, in this diagram, we have 7 wheels. And each of those wheels has a 7-fold nature. Looks like the Star of Bethlehem flower in the Rescue Remedy. It's called the seed of life, is one of these spheres. Wheels within wheels. That somehow the influence of the divine intelligences works through these kind of centers, these 0-point centers. There's not the 1 0 point then manifests as 7. He places them in the 6 directions of space and one in the middle, the central wheel. The swift and radiant one produces the 7 Laya centers and seats the universe on these eternal foundations. And I say in my writing, the 7 Laya centers are the 7 0 points, using the term 0 in the same sense that chemists do, to indicate a point in esotericism, where the scale of reckoning of differentiation begins. You see, the idea of a singularity in modern physics, that is the point at where differentiation begins. Because of the uncertainty principle, you can only measure to a certain distance and you can measure no further because you pass beyond differentiation. But that's what Blavatsky's saying. Now, this is the most important concept, and this is the last one I have on Blavatsky before we come to modern science. This is very complex material. But this is Blavatsky's metaphysical view of the causes of the laws of nature. All of the so-called forces of nature, electricity, magnetism, light, heat, etc., etc., far from being modes of motion of material particles, are, in essence, in their ultimate constitution, the differentiated aspect of that universal motion. The universal motion being the ceaseless breath. When Foucault is said to produce 7 Laya centers, it means that for formative or creative purposes, the great law stops, or rather modifies, its perpetual motion on 7 invisible points within the area of the manifested universe. The great breath digs through space 7 holes into Laya, to cause them to circumgyrate during Manvantara, which means a period of manifestation. So, now imagine, this is in 1888, and Blavatsky was saying all the laws of physics are really due to these 7 invisible points circumgyrating, established in higher dimensional space. Like, wow, like how bizarre. It's hard to even conceive of what she was talking about. But wait now to see where we come to in modern physics. And we'll come back to this quote. Okay, so I come back to this point where we began before. Now we'll go into science. What did science discover since Blavatsky? Oh, my goodness, what's that? Oh, the universe emerging from a singularity point. You see, people don't realize even something so basic as the concept that our universe emerged from a singularity. Blavatsky predicted that by over 100 years. That's astonishing. I mean, you look around you in the world, what would lead you to believe our huge, huge universe emerged from a point beyond perception? She did. Okay, and that's just comparing. In the standard Big Bang theory, the universe begins with a point of 0 volume and infinite density and temperature, a mathematical impossibility known as a singularity. This is a singularity. These are different depictions of singularity from science magazines or books. Singularity is actually assigned a Planck's length of 10 to the minus 33 centimeters, which is a billionth the diameter of a proton. Okay, so like pretty small. Okay, it's also assigned a Planck's time of 10 to the minus 45 seconds. Okay, which is the amount of time it takes light to travel Planck's distance. Okay? So scientists in our era now trace our universe back to a singularity at the first point 0.0000045 zeros 1 of a second. And at that point, the universe was an infinitesimal point, a billionth the diameter of a proton. That is confirmation of the secret doctrine. That was predicted by Blavatsky 100 years ago. Who would these theists say, oh, you got a theory, you say God created the universe, but you don't explain how or what it... But Blavatsky did. A bizarre concept. This is the uncertainty principle. I'm going to skip through this at the moment. This is a physicist Jack D, who took part in the same symposium in 1984 as John was in, and he argued if you read the very bottom, he's trying to explain that in Blavatsky's view, everything is really part of the same point. You see, a space-time continuum is created out of a point. So in a way, everything in that space-time continuum, in a way, is still part of that point. Everything is contained in a point, whose center is nowhere and circumference everywhere. That's an aside. Okay, well, what does Stephen Hawking's? He described Blavatsky's era. He said nearly everybody in the 18th and 19th century believed that the universe was essentially unchanging in time. One could equally well believe that it had existed forever, or that it had been created in its present form a finite time ago. Well, Blavatsky didn't believe that, Stephen. She believed something different. She believed the eternity of the universe in total as a boundless plane, periodically the playground of numberless universes, incessantly manifesting and disappearing, called the manifesting stars and the sparks of eternity. The eternity of the pilgrim is like a wink in the eye of self-existence. I love that. A wink in the eye of self-existence. Isn't that cool? So Blavatsky in 1888, not only was she saying our universe emerged from a singularity, but she says an infinite number of universes emerge from point sources out of the eternal parent space. Not only that, Blavatsky, imagine this is a plane of being. This is the eternal parent space with my arms. And what you have is from a 0-point source, you have a universe emerging that expands within, without. Okay, with the creation. And eventually, Blavatsky says, it contracts without, within, back to a Laya center and back into the nothingness. So not only does Blavatsky predict the emergence of the universe from a singularity, she predicts the collapse of the universe into a singularity. Modern physicists now conceive of the same thing. That our universe, if there's enough matter, might eventually overcome the expansion, and it could begin a phase of contraction and eventually contract back to the dreaded singularity at the end of time, which they call the Big Crunch. Begins with a big bang and it ends with a big crunch. It begins with the alpha point and it ends with the omega point. That's what Blavatsky predicted. It's another depiction of a universe emerging out of the quantum vacuum depicted below. The sea of infinite energies, and it gives rise to all these different new universes. This is depiction at different levels of the quantum vacuum. The first level, 10 to the minus 12 centimeters, space seems empty. But the deeper you go into it, you see the violent turbulations within the quantum vacuum, the ceaseless breath. Okay, I need to move along a bit, so I'm not going to... But on the right is physicist Heinz Pagels. He says, the old idea of the vacuum, that it is empty space, nothingness, has also changed. It is not empty, it is a plenum. And he goes on to explain that all the forces of nature, all the quanta of nature, everything is latent in the nothingness. Blavatsky predicted that 100 years ago. Now in science they believe in what it's called vacuum genesis. Well, Blavatsky believed in vacuum genesis. She didn't use that term.
Yeah, it's so beautiful.
I know, it's beautiful. Unbelievably beautiful. Okay, this is another depiction of the quantum vacuum at different levels and how you go deeper and deeper and it's more and more turbulent. This is zero-point fields in modern physics.